All right, let's talk about one of the most influential and debated figures in all of human history, the Apostle Paul. For 2,000 years, people have been arguing about his true legacy. So, was he a reformer or a revolutionary? We're going to dive deep into that question, and it's a big one because it really gets to the heart of two of the world's major religions. So, here's the big question, right? Was the Apostle Paul a faithful Torah-observant Jew his entire life, just trying to work things out from the inside? Or did his message represent a fundamental break, creating something totally new? This is the fascinating historical puzzle we're going to try and piece together. You've got to understand, Paul wasn't just thinking this stuff up in a vacuum. He was responding to a very real identity crisis happening in the first century. You see, non-Jews, the so-called Gentiles, were starting to believe in the Messiah of Israel. And that raised a huge practical question. So, where do we fit in all this? Do we have to become fully Jewish, or is there another way to belong? This was the problem Paul set out to solve. Okay, so how did Paul tackle this? Well, there are a couple of big ways to look at it. And the first one, it's all about inclusion. This idea comes from a school of thought called the Paul within Judaism school. You'll often see it called the PWJ school. And their whole thing is, Paul never stopped being Jewish, not for a second. In their view, he lived and died as a Jew who just happened to believe Jesus was the Messiah. So from this point of view, Paul wasn't trying to start a new religion called Christianity. No way. The goal was to bring Gentiles into the story of Israel, to include them right alongside the Jewish people who had also put their faith in Jesus. It wasn't about replacement, it was about expansion. And they've got a ton of evidence to back this up, you know? You look at the texts, and Paul is constantly saying, I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. We see him going to synagogues, observing Jewish feasts, and get this, he even uses the Shema, which is like the absolute central prayer of Judaism, to make his case for bringing Gentiles in. It's a pretty powerful argument. But that's only one side of the coin. There's a totally different way to look at all this. And this other answer is all about transformation. And this slide right here really gets to the core of the whole debate. Is it about inclusion, where Gentiles join in with Israel, but everyone kind of keeps their own ethnic identity? Or is it transformation, where a totally new mixed community is formed, and those old ethnic lines, well, they just don't matter as much anymore? This transformation idea is championed by a different group, called the New Perspective on Paul's School, or NPP. For them, Paul was pushing back hard against any kind of ethnic exclusivism. They believe his mission was to create this renewed family of God that literally went beyond all those old boundaries. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because both sides are looking at the exact same words from Paul and seeing completely different things. You know, when Paul calls his old life rubbish, is he trashing all of Judaism or just the part of him that was a violent zealot? And what about his former life in Judaism? Was that him converting out of it or just changing his job description within it? See, your answer totally depends on which lens you're using. Okay, to really get this, we've got to look at one specific piece of evidence. It's this one incredible metaphor that, honestly, both sides use to make their point. It comes from his letter to the Romans. Paul uses this image of an olive tree, and it's become absolutely central to this entire debate. Now, for the inclusion side, this olive tree is pretty much their smoking gun. So here's how they see it. The olive tree, that's Israel. Simple enough. Now, some of the original branches, that's Jewish people who didn't follow Jesus, they get broken off. Then you've got these wild olive branches, that's the Gentiles, and they get grafted in. But here's the key. They're grafted onto the same tree. They're still being fed by that original Jewish root. So, what does that mean? It means everyone depends on each other. The Gentiles are brought in, they get to be part of the story, but they absolutely do not replace Israel. It's addition, not subtraction. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This is all cool ancient history, but why does this matter to me right now? Well, as it turns out, this debate has huge implications for today. Yeah, this is so much more than just an argument for scholars in ivory towers. The answer to this question, inclusion or transformation, it actually shapes how we think about religion, community, and even our own identities in the modern world. I mean, the impact is massive. For centuries, a lot of Christian thought was based on the idea that Christianity just replaced Judaism. The inclusion view completely flips that script. It changes the entire conversation between Jews and Christians. It forces us to ask new questions about what religious identity even means, and can totally change how you read huge chunks of the New Testament. It gives us a framework for people being united while still celebrating their diversity. So we come back to that central question. Was Paul's mission all about inclusion, grafting new life onto the ancient tree of Israel, or was it about transformation, creating something brand new from the ground up? It's a 2,000-year-old question that is still pushing us today to figure out how we build community, how we understand faith, and how we relate to each other across all kinds of divides.